Welcome to Peter Twig Meditation. Today we discuss the question, what is consciousness? The topic of consciousness is a difficult and theoretical topic, but it does have huge ramifications for us as meditators. This might extend from simply knowing yourself as a person, or sorting out what is real, important or illusory in you and in your world, and in meditation, or if you want to become an angel. Now, if this topic is a bit long and difficult, bear with me. I think you'll find some real gems to savour. Firstly, let's examine consciousness from a typical definition perspective. Here is Wikipedia's definition. Consciousness at its simplest is sentience or awareness of internal and external existence. Despite millennia of analysis, definitions, explanations and debates by philosophers and scientists, consciousness remains puzzling and controversial, being at once the most familiar and also the most mysterious aspect of our lives. Perhaps the only widely agreed notion about the topic is the intuition that consciousness exists. Opinions differ about what exactly needs to be studied and explained as consciousness. Sometimes it's synonymous with the mind, and other times an aspect of mind. In the past, it was one's inner life, the world of introspection, of private thought, imagination and volition. Today it often includes any kind of cognition, experience, feeling or perception. As you can tell, this is not really helpful, nor does it appear that they have found any answers. Wikipedia goes on to note that the dictionary definitions of the word consciousness extend through several centuries and reflect a range of seemingly related meanings, with some differences that have been controversial, such as the distinction between inward awareness and perception of the physical world, or the distinction between conscious and unconscious, or the notion of a mental entity or mental activity that is not physical. The spiritual perspective would suggest that this is all hopeless. You don't have to go very deep into meditation to realize that consciousness is everywhere and does not, as the scientific paradigm suggests, that consciousness is not a product of the mind, nor is it the mind. As Merriam-Webster defines consciousness, at its simplest is sentience or awareness of internal or external existence. To this day, consciousness remains a mystery, a final frontier you might say, an age-old question occupying the minds of scientists and mystics alike. The study of consciousness attempts to understand the peak human questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? The focus, of course, vain vessels that we are, is mainly on ourselves, our little bodies with our overactive minds. Scientists confuse consciousness with the brain and mind. Scientists equate consciousness with the brain, the nervous system, a body-centric focus that you don't have to go very far in your meditation to realize is patently false. You soon come to realize that consciousness is independent of the body and the brain and extends far beyond your body. From the standpoint of spiritual vision, even a rock contains consciousness. It is consciousness. Not very interesting perhaps, but residing consciousness no less. Just as this physical universe is consciousness in one form, so consciousness extends to the formless, just as we humans have higher, more refined levels of consciousness that meditation awakens and engages. We often hear the term raising your vibration. Meditation and the stillness involved helps to raise your level of vibration. The more you raise your vibration, the more you can open into higher level orders of consciousness. One's inner life, the world of introspection, thought and imagination, give rise to ideas, creativity, experience, cognition, feelings and perceptions that grow more subtle and nuanced as your vibration rises. Awareness of your awareness, in other words self-awareness, as it deepens allows access to deeper levels of consciousness and the mysteries they bring. Exploration of consciousness becomes a fascinating revelation of facets of ourselves and the creation, form and formless, as consciousness. So to answer the question, what is consciousness? We find it's a circular answer that highlights one of the core paradoxes of consciousness. Awareness or self-awareness presents the feeling that we are simultaneously and synchronously both the subject and object of our perception, and yet both roles cannot be logically simultaneous, due simply to the time lag required to process information and form a point of view from the standpoint of the mind. Who we perceive ourselves to be is who we were a few hundred milliseconds ago, from the standpoint of the mind. To come to a deeper understanding of ourselves, we need to move beyond the finite processes of the mind. Rather, consciousness can be thought of as layers of awareness requiring navigation and access skills to open deeper levels of understanding and cognition. From a standpoint beyond the mind, we perceive that there are strata of consciousness we can rest our awareness on and indeed draw from. We can begin to perceive our consciousness existing in relation to personal and universal aspects of ourselves. That consciousness exists in and to itself. Any sense of me or achieving things for me are at best illusory and reflect the separation between our mind and other largely unconscious or unknown parts of ourselves. That is because our consciousness transcends many levels. The key here is to understand your consciousness has individual and universal components. Meditation quickly takes you into these universal states of consciousness. You can realize consciousness as a series of emanations from a source. Our consciousness is the emanation of consciousness of other beings. You might call these spiritual beings. This gives rise to Emanationism, an idea in cosmology or cosmogony of various religious and philosophical systems. Emanation, from the Latin emanare, meaning to flow from or to pour forth or out of, is the mode by which all things are derived from the first reality or principle. All things are derived from the first reality or perfect God by steps of degradation to lesser degrees of the first reality or God, and at every step the emanating beings are less pure, less perfect, less divine. Emanation is the transcendent principle from which everything is derived, and is opposed to both creationism, talked about in the modern world, and materialism. Neoplatonism and other sources assert that all things flow from an underlying principle or reality, usually called the Absolute or Godhead. Some movies touch on these concepts, including The Matrix and Star Wars series. The philosopher and cosmologist Robert Kleinman suggests that underlying the worldview of traditional cosmology is the idea that the universe is an emanation of a unitary divine principle. There is a chain of emanations extending from massive states of consciousness that might be referred to as the divine or God, down to the little individual persona you know yourself as watching this video. Human individualism and separateness has done a lot to muddy these terms, so please bear with me as I attempt to explain a complex story in understandable terms. Also, it's important to understand your culture and society play an important part in shaping who you are and as an emanation. And yet, this is just the start of the journey. The more we meditate, we move to contact the substance of consciousness. That substance is fire, cosmic fire, one of the two elements that make up the firmament we inhabit. Ultimately, consciousness is fire and extends beyond the creation. Raising the level of fire means raising your vibration. The more you hold higher levels of fire, the more you can resonate with higher order states of consciousness and their attendant spiritual beings. Why do people get fidgety after being forced to be still for a little while? This level of spiritual fire starts to build up and they begin to feel uncomfortable as samskaras or emotional blockages begin to erupt. They become restless and feel the need to move. To stay in prolonged states of stillness without the required releasing of samskaras means people can go into deeply painful emotional states. This is due to the activation of core samskaras, emotional blockages, by fire. Why then do meditators sit upright, meditating in stillness? Through stillness they experience fire in a kind of cooking or transformation of their subtle bodies. Sitting upright allows the spine to be aligned in a vertical fashion, like a lightning rod through which fire can resonate. When people nod and tell you they meditate by gardening, surfing or jogging, for example, they miss the point of meditation, the stillness and vertical sitting posture. Their movement in gardening or surfing, for example, dissipates the fire and its transformative value. The truth is there are no meditation benefits to these so-called meditation pastimes other than being in nature and the physical exercise of gardening or surfing that brings the ease of a relaxed mind and a tired body. In the Western esoteric tradition, the spirit is the manifesting force of your consciousness in the creation. The name given to our consciousness is ego, spelt with a capital E. This is different to the ego as defined by Freudian psychology, which refers to the mind. On the individual level, the spirit feeds our spiritual bodies and physical bodies with the light of our ego. In human beings, the ego, capital E, is the eternal part of yourself, the part that travels from lifetime to lifetime, the eternal flame and the principle of individuality, the I am in you. It is fire, the fire of your consciousness. The Christ principle or consciousness in the Western esoteric tradition is the lighthouse of ego-ness which enlightens humanity. It is the source from which human egos can be nourished. It can know the divine. The ego is the part of you which can be one with God. The ego is to the human beings what the sun is to the solar system. Through resonance and combining your ego essence with the source using meditation, human egos realize their potential for divinity. In other words, the human story is as much about redemption and rediscovering your divinity as it is about that part of you that empathizes with others and is able to express and receive love. It is the very thing that makes the human experience special. That makes life on earth precious. Even though Christ and Christ consciousness refer to the same level of the divine, Christ consciousness is a far better term when it comes to conveying the concept of lighthouse of ego-ness. Unfortunately, in most people's minds, Christ conveys fixed charge religious associations and quite a different range of meanings. We don't want to fall into that trap, nor do we want to be bound by churchianity, Christian dogma, or people's emotional baggage as we discuss consciousness and ego, capital E, states. So why then would we want to meditate? Many people reach a point in their lives where they ask themselves, is this all there is to being alive on earth? Others, myself included, have a thirst to know themselves to the most profound levels. The answer doesn't lie in the circumstances of your life, its ups and downs, the travesties and the hurts. You need to look inside yourself to find the answers. I'm reminded of 3 famous quotes that express this. The first is from Lao Tzu. He who knows others is wise, he who knows himself is enlightened. And the second is engraved over the door of the ancient oracle of Delphi in Greece. Know thyself. Here lies the first and only clue needed to begin raising your level of vibration of your consciousness. Finally, Pythagoras also opined, know thyself, and thou shalt know the universe and gods. Deep inside ourselves, this ego part is calling to us, waiting patiently for us to remember, for it only wants one thing for you. And that is for you to be reunited with the divine. For some, this voice can be heard. For most, it is lost in the thoughts, chatter, excitement and drama of daily life. Our most important task while being here on earth is to know yourself. Spiritually, is an inward journey of discovery that reveals the fullness, richness and source from where you come from and where you will return. The fire that is your consciousness and your ego is that substance by which you can know yourself, and meditation is that path by which you discover the depths of yourself. Now, if you meditate and want to learn more about your meditation process, stick around by subscribing as I bring you more tips, techniques and context to help improve your meditation. Once again, thanks for watching.